Please take your seats. The session will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. The session is about to begin.
And do we want to do a clearing the room one?
Without access to education and healthcare, fewer than 1 in 10 children born into extreme poverty will overcome it as adults. When children receive the right support, one life can transform a family. One family can uplift a community.
Crystal House ensures every one of our students has the comprehensive support systems they need to thrive both in school and beyond. And we're in it for the long haul with an 18-year intervention that integrates rigorous academic learning with nutrition and healthcare, life skills and social support, and college and career guidance from kindergarten into their first job.
For more than 25 years, Crystal House has supported over 20,000 young people across Mexico, India, South Africa, Jamaica, and the United States. Around the world, 97% of our alumni are studying, working, or both, and they are 3 times more likely to land formal jobs than their peers. Our students have gone from extreme poverty to fulfilling lives as doctors, scientists, artists, and teachers.
Today, we commit to expanding the Crystal House model to 2 new countries.
In Nepal, we will bring our comprehensive model to new communities alongside a visionary entrepreneur.
Is a dream come true.
In Colombia, together with Fundación Santo Domingo, we will start a new chapter for Crystal House in South America.
We're very excited to have Crystal House International come to Colombia and co-invest with us in the development of a new school.
Our schools will open doors for thousands of students, delivering the tools they need to transform their lives.
This is the beginning of what's possible when approaches that work reach those who need them the most.
Is a match made in heaven.
A child's potential should be limitless.
With the right support, our children can achieve anything.
Together, we can open even more schools and create pathways out of poverty for generations to come.
Please welcome to the stage from Building Tomorrow, George Soror.
Hello and good morning. My name is George Soror and I'm the co-founder and chief dreamer at Building Tomorrow. When I first attended CGI, I remember feeling overwhelmed by the sense of responsibility, joining incredible organizations and individuals from all over the world who are moved to somehow leave this world better than they have found it. Being part of the CGI community has helped open doors and create relationships that have helped elevate the work of Building Tomorrow to improve literacy and numeracy for all children through community-powered learning. This work has never felt more important with education, like so many other sectors, at an inflection point. From the proliferation of AI and its challenges and opportunities to the challenges humanitarian crises present for education, it's clear we must reimagine education systems to fit the current landscape. Today, I'm honored to share how CGI commitment makers are doing their own part to expand access to education around the world. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Higgins from Alliance for a Healthier Generation.
Thank you. Well, our health is shaped by where we live, learn, and grow. And for nearly 50 million kids, this means school. I experienced this firsthand as I worked as a public school teacher in rural Virginia. For many of my students, school was the only place they could count on a healthy meal, a safe place to play, and a chance to be heard. Just last year, at Minadeo Elementary School in Pittsburgh, a different environment, I watched students sample new roasted fruit recipe during National School Breakfast Week. They weren't just eating, they were engaging, they were exploring, they were sharing their opinions. That moment reminded me that when kids feel supported, seen and heard, that is when they thrive. Throughout my career, from the classroom to public health, I've witnessed how school-based health strategies are essential to better health and academic outcomes. Yet educators and administrators are often operating under immense pressure, navigating limited staffing, budget constraints, burnout, and competing priorities. These leaders are deeply committed to their students' well-being and deserve practical, evidence-based, accessible support to help bring these strategies to life. And that is where Healthier Generation comes in. Founded 20 years ago by the Clinton Foundation and the American Heart Association, we have partnered with thousands of schools to create healthy learning environments. Locally, we work on the ground with school communities to drive changes that reflect the local values and priorities. By convening educators, families, health professionals, and community leaders, we foster cross-sector partnerships, support decision-making, and implement policies and practices that improve student, staff, and family health. Nationally, we offer hands-on guidance and practical self-paced roadmaps through our Action Center that improves health outcomes. Through our website and one-of-a-kind digital hub, schools and districts can access assessments, wellness policies, the templates for those, the resources and training. And our annual award program motivates and guides schools to advance a culture of health across school communities. To date, we have recognized 3,300 schools through our America's Healthiest School Award. And we celebrate our 20th, as we celebrate our 20th anniversary, we're not just reflecting, we are recommitting. We are announcing a CGI commitment to action to support and recognize 1,700 new schools in the next 5 years, reaching 5,000 schools by 2030. This is more than just a milestone, this is a movement. When we show up for schools, we help build a foundation of lifelong health for millions of children and families, and we welcome you all to join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, for sharing how you'll be showing up for schools and meeting the moment for teachers and students. We all look forward to celebrating your 5,000th school with you. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Elpida Kokora from Mehoho, Gloria Anderson from Tanzania Enlightenment Development Innovations, Denise Walsh from Pan-African Higher Education Initiative Foundation, and Yulia Lemesh from Ukraine Global Scholars Foundation. Since announcing its commitment to democratize education for 300,000 women around the world, Mehoho has been actively recruiting learners to take classes through its digital platform. Facilitators around the world are also being trained to deliver education courses to women in remote communities. And to reach even more students, Mehoho now offers educational videos with subtitles and transcripts in 18 languages, rather than just the originally planned 5 languages. Through this work, women are able to access education as a vital tool for personal and professional growth, while also activating community development and financial security for their families. Tanzania Enlightenment Development Innovations is committing to establish 50 computer labs in underserved public secondary schools to bridge the digital divide and improve access to quality education for students across Tanzania. Through this expansion of its successful One Computer Lab, One School program, Teddy will provide 60,000 students digital literacy and skills training to prepare them for academic success and future employment. And 1,000 teachers will be accredited to advance Tanzania's digital education strategy. And to power the computer labs, Teddy is partnering with the Give Power Foundation for solar-powered, cost-effective setups built for low-resource and rural environments. The Pan-African Higher Education Initiative is committing to create opportunities for 280 girls in Cameroon to attain affordable and quality education. United States academic credentials and local employment are also part of this commitment. With agreements between African and US-based academic partners, girls will be able to earn a US bachelor's degree in business administration or public accounting, which they will be able to leverage to access local employment, entrepreneurial opportunities, or international careers. As Africa's youth unemployment crisis continues, this is an opportunity to foster young talent, build a fit-for-purpose workforce prepared for 21st century jobs, and create globally competitive economic hubs on the continent. Ukraine Global Scholars Foundation is committing to launch a technology-driven platform to help globally educated Ukrainians and international professionals integrate into Ukraine's workforce to help drive national economic recovery. UGS has supported more than 300 Ukrainian students to access world-class education outside Ukraine, and through this new Back to Impact Ukraine initiative, they will work with employers and support program alumni to return to Ukraine by providing the tools needed to navigate job placement, relocation, and reintegration. Following this initial pilot, the program will be expanded to include highly skilled international talent to further support Ukraine's economic growth and resilience. Commitments are really just the beginning. Dig in, roll up your sleeves, and find others who are ready and willing to join you. You'll be surprised who you'll meet at CGI and what you can accomplish together.
Please welcome to our stage Andrew Jack.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session on quality and accessible education. So you're going to hear some more commitments, and over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to hear from two great panelists, four great speakers that are very active in this space. I should say I write about education for the Financial Times. Our own commitment, if you like, to this whole field includes giving full free access to quality journalism to all high school students around the world, we think, which is really important as part of building insight and fact into the curricula. But let me now invite our first two panelists to join us for this first session. So John King, Jr., who's the Chancellor of the State University of New York, and Dr. D'Angela Burns-Wallace of the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. So welcome both. Thanks to this discussion. So the key issue here is let's begin with quality education. John, what does it really mean to you in the SUNY system?
Well, look, quality starts with access for us. So at SUNY, we have 64 campuses. 95% of New Yorkers live within 30 miles of a SUNY campus, and we serve about 1.3 million students a year across our degree programs and non-degree programs. So it starts with access. Then it's about outcomes, making sure that the students who start actually finish, and that is a huge challenge throughout American higher education. So many students begin their college education, drop out, end up with debt and no degree. So we're very focused on making sure students complete. And then we're very focused on the post-graduation outcomes. We want to make sure that our students get good jobs that are providing family-sustaining wages in the 21st century economy, and that they're prepared to be good citizens. And in this moment, that seems particularly important to make sure that students are prepared to engage in civil discourse, to disagree agreeably, to find a path forward with their neighbors to solve big problems.
And let's talk a bit about, on top of all the complexities which we'll come back to, including the current situation, but even around technology and what we're seeing both around AI and around hybrid learning, since we've seen particularly since the pandemic. How are you integrating, or how disruptive are those forces to engage around that issue?
Yeah, I mean, so there's good news and bad news. The good news is AI is helping us drive forward research in really powerful ways. Research on better treatment for disease, ways to address the consequences of climate change, and we've got researchers, particularly across our major research institutions, University of Buffalo, Stony Brook University, Binghamton University, University of Albany, who are focused on those questions. That's great. it is also great to be able to leverage technology to make education more accessible for folks. So I think about some of our hybrid classes where a student in one of our community colleges, we have 30 of them, might be in a class where their schedule doesn't work, where childcare falls through today. And so what are they going to do? Are they going to miss class, or are they going to stay home with their kid? Well, because of the hybrid learning opportunity, they can still participate in class and continue their studies. Hugely helpful. We have our SUNY Empire, our fully online university, which is providing nearly 20,000 students with the opportunity to take asynchronous courses, many of them to complete their degree. So that's amazing. On the downside, I would say we are not moving fast enough in the higher education sector to change teaching and learning to leverage technology to improve outcomes. We are not moving fast enough to help our students who are about to graduate navigate the world of AI. If you're going to be an engineer or a nurse or a lawyer today, you have to have an understanding of how AI will affect your field. We still have a lot of work to do to get there. And we have some fundamental academic integrity challenges that people don't like to talk about, but that are a big problem. High schools and colleges, students who are using ChatGPT to do the thinking for them, that is very dangerous to the long-term well-being of humankind. And so we're thinking about how do we change courses in ways that ensure that the students are doing the thinking.
I can't resist to quickly follow up. So what is the best practice you are seeing in that space, how to respond to that?
There's two, I would say. There's the newfangled one and the old-fashioned one. The old-fashioned one is blue books, and going back to the blue books and asking students to come into class and write down, write in response to a prompt about what they have read, what they have learned. That's the old-fashioned one. The newfangled one, I'd say, is figuring out how you create new kinds of assignments where students are leveraging technology in order to advance their learning. One great example I've seen is around language learning and creating an avatar that a student can engage with in another language, and the avatar can then adjust their level of grammar and vocabulary complexity to match yours, so your learning is accelerated by that experience. Now, I'd say we're not moving fast enough on the newfangled ones, and we probably aren't diligent enough about using the old-fashioned blue book.
Problem with the old-fashioned is remembering how to write, right? Or even being able to read it these days. but D'Angelo, let's turn to you in the work of the foundation. So sticking on our key issue here of quality and access, and obviously there are longer-standing challenges in the US as well as elsewhere about sort of attainment levels, college readiness. And then, of course, that's all been accelerated and challenged pandemic, post-pandemic. So what role are you seeing? What's the scope for philanthropy to try to close that gap?
So the beauty of philanthropy is that we can sit in the gaps. We sit in between spaces where when we see innovation happening with our higher ed partners, with our K-12 partners, out in industry, we have the ability to stand in those gaps and leverage into those spaces. We're dipping all the way back down into high school as we think about some of these things around quality education. And to your point, Chancellor, we are literally saying to that high school student, we're with 32 school districts in our region, and we're bringing real-world learning experiences into the classroom. And so these aren't, after school, these aren't summer experiences, they're embedded in the curriculum where the actual teachers and the students are doing client-based projects that are being brought by the employers. They're doing, kind of these entrepreneurial thinking around some of the work and finding solutions, practical solutions where they're doing hands-on analysis, where they are sitting in teams and thinking critically about what is the issue, how do we solution it, and then delivering that. And not in a theoretical way. We actually have the employers at the table saying, okay, share the solution with us. This isn't the college student, these are the 9th through 12th graders. Because in this conversation, we have that K-12 environment, we have the higher ed environment, and we have the employers, but we are incentivizing that employer to understand what is that talent pipeline and how do they invest in it. We're challenging that 9th through 12th grader to think about what is their pathway and what is all of the skills that they need to be exposed to and how fun, truly fun it can be to do work. And that is something that sometimes we've moved away from. We have these paths where like, you must do this, you must take this test, you must get into this college, and then like it's a linear path, and we know it's not. We know our students, they move around, they spiral through systems. But trying to connect with intentionality is something for philanthropy, we have that ability to kind of sometimes be just outside the box and allow both our K-12 systems and our higher ed systems to innovate and try some new things and bring different partners like industry to the table because we can incentivize it. We can be that catalyst.
As you say, I mean, obviously philanthropy can generate new ideas, be innovative and nimble, provides money, which is always welcome.
Yes.
That said, obviously you're dealing with existing systems, you know, curricula and timetables that are quite constrained, sometimes perhaps big cultural barriers between, as you say, employers and schools and so on. What's the secret of being able to sort of insert into those established systems and disrupt and get engagement from all the different parties?
I think you actually said it. It's engagement. One of the things about for the 32 school districts that we work with through our real world learning, we are with those superintendents. We didn't come to the table and said, here's the solution, here's what you do, we're gonna fund it, and this is what we want you to implement. We actually work with those superintendents and those school districts to say, based on your district, based on the industries that are around your district, what matches onto your environment and your student? What resources do you need? We created a network where they are learning together, that they are creating different resources together, and then they're sharing across. There is not one district in that 32 that is doing the exact same thing, but putting the infrastructure behind them to actually incentivize the collaboration of the network. But beyond that, a smaller group within that group realized that there are also some policy-related issues in terms of state standards that needed to also be addressed. So in that space, a smaller group is now working around policy-related issues with our state accreditation to be able to say, and have gotten a waiver to actually use experiential learning in place of some of the standardized testing. And it's because of the work where we have like systemic and we have the data showing the growth in students thinking, that critical thinking, that exposure to this opportunity. It's a waiver, so it's just a start, and it's only a handful of districts that have received that waiver. But what happens when you do pilots, when you test things, sometimes you can get those policies to change and have that long-term impact. If they can open up that policy avenue, we have 32 other districts on our side of the state and another 15 districts on the other side of the state that are ready and have their data around the experiential learning, this hands-on learning that can move into that space. That's the power of that collaboration, but also sometimes for that network to happen, right? These superintendents are busy. They don't necessarily have the extra time or space or capacity. So as you mentioned also, it comes with dollars. Like we recognize that there are dollars that are needed for that district to create that capacity to do this extra bit of work, not added on to what they're already doing, but giving them the capacity to actually dedicate the time and staff to be able to do this work effectively.
And just thinking about that issue of buy-in, I mean, obviously the other thing there's a lot of debate about at the moment is disengagement by students. Yeah, you know, again, it's got much worse since the pandemic, and partly at least it seems to be linked to the uncertainties about the future. So what, any best practices you've seen from some of the work you've been involved with about how to get them re-engaged and motivated to get up to speed and move on to college?
One of the components of this work is that it's called student voice. And so the students are actually the ambassadors and the advocates for this work. We have students who have come through and have done many of these different projects with the employers that are now in their 2-year or 4-year spaces, and they are still interning or in apprenticeships. Some of them are going directly into these employers for work. We're actually using that near-peer student voice to bring back to help that younger student understand and see the connectivity. We're using those students who are in those higher ed spaces to talk about how much that opportunity prepared them to understand what major they should choose. Because that's part of this swirling, right? The pressure that is on our students to understand and know their pathway is so intense that we have students just simply checking out. Right? And so using that near peer, using, again, not this theoretical, you can be this and you have to take these classes, but when they deliver that client-initiated project, we're actually tying that to curriculum and showing them, this is how you're using what you're learning in math. This is how you're using what you're learning in science. This is how you're using what you're learning in social studies. But when you go on to college, these are the type of majors and skill sets you want to build to be able to pursue that. They can't hear that from us as adults. They can't hear that from us as systems and organizations. But I will tell you, particularly with this generation, they can hear it from each other. They have their own YouTube channel. They have their own TikTok channel. They have, like, for this work. So we have the students talking to each other and sharing their successes through this work.
Yeah, everything's become much more horizontal, hasn't it, rather than vertical. But John, picking up on that, I mean, even at college level, I hear and see a lot still of, whether it's just attention deficit, shall we say, or whether it's motivation longer term. I mean, what do you see in terms of what's needed to try to keep these college level students motivated?
Yeah, I mean, I think D'Angela's point about the value of experiential learning is exactly right. So we've set a goal at SUNY for every undergraduate to have an internship experience. And our experience has been that when students have that, they have a much clearer sense of what it's all for and what might be next for them. We have a long way to go. We're probably about 2/3 of our students right now who have those internship experiences, so we're trying to generate more of them. For example, we launched something called the Empire State Service Corps, which is an initiative where we have 500 SUNY students who are paid to do 300 hours a year of public service work. And they are doing work in K-12 tutoring, they're doing work on food and housing insecurity on campus and in the community, they're doing work with community-based organizations, and so we are helping them get that hands-on experience, and it both changes them because they have this fulfilling service experience, and it gives them hands-on learning, and it puts them in community with other folks who are serving who might be different from them. So it's sort of in the tradition of the federal AmeriCorps program, but we're doing it within SUNY through this Empire State Service Corps.
And let's keep focusing on that idea of the immersion gradually into the world of work. D'Angela, I think you've focused quite a lot on entrepreneurship as well. Tell us a little bit more about how that gets embedded and what the successes have been.
So our founder, Mr. Kaufman, believed that every individual should have the control of their own future, and one of the pathways to do that is through business ownership and being an entrepreneur. I think over the years, we've expanded that to really not just being that entrepreneur themselves, but the entrepreneurial mindset. And so what we are seeing is in working with, we have one of the coalitions that we fund into has our K-12, it has 2-year, it has 4-year, it has our entrepreneurial ecosystem entities, and each one is looking to how do we infuse this entrepreneurial learning or mindset both into the curriculum and into the experiences of our students. And so that is this critical thinking. It is problem-solving based. It is the learning and failure of ideas and concepts, right? And so if you think about that entrepreneurial spirit, it is try, knowing that you're gonna try 30 times and 29 of the 30 just might fail, but when that one clicks, it happens. And so it's how do we bring that into the curriculum, not a course, right? But that it's actually integrated across how you think about approaching any topic, any field. Babson College is one of our partners and has been with the foundation for a number of years, almost since our beginning of doing this work. And they literally moved from having a center of entrepreneurship to actually having a requirement for all of their graduates to be exposed to entrepreneurial thinking and learning as a concept, irrespective of major, field, degree. right? And that is growing. And when you do that, again, it's this connectivity to truly, for our students, understanding what it means to think differently and think innovatively, but then how do I then incentivize that for my future? And so we're working, whether it's K-12, 2-year, 4-year industry, to make that connection at each level. What does that look like, and how do we develop that so that those students see their pathway?
So we're almost out of time, but Joe, we can't ignore the issue of what's been going on in Washington the last few months and the impact that's had on education. But how are you finding you can respond to that or be resilient against these sort of headwinds at the moment?
Look, I think we have to be very clear that, unfortunately, there's been this departure from what was a clear bipartisan consensus for generations that higher education was foundational to the long-term health of our economy. You know, you think about the federal partnership with higher ed around research, which has driven so much innovation in our economy. You think about the federal Pell Grant program, which has made it possible for generations of Americans to access higher education. So our view in New York is we're committed to those principles, even if there are folks in Washington who may not be. And so the Governor Hochul, has been willing to make significant investments. We just announced a $300 million investment in quantum research at Stony Brook University just last week. So we're going to keep pushing there. We're committed to college access and affordability. The governor launched SUNY Reconnect, free community college for adults 25 to 55 in high-demand workforce areas, advanced manufacturing, nursing, et cetera. So we're going to keep pushing forward on those things and keep reminding members of Congress about the stakes for their constituents. Because at the end of the day, these decisions about how much to invest in the National Science Foundation or the level of spending on Pell Grants, those are congressional decisions. And we need members on both sides of the aisle to remember this is about the future of their communities.
Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you both very much. Do please thank our panel.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think now we're going to hear from Moang Soyadola of the Rohingya Student Network.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Saidullah. I am a Rohingya refugee, and I am a student at New York University, and I am a human rights advocate. I was born in Myanmar, where my people, the Rohingya, were denied citizenship from the freedom of movement and from the access to higher education. The Rohingya are the most persecuted and the most oppressed in this world. The slow-burning genocide against Rohingya people in Myanmar forced myself, my family, and more than 700,000 Rohingya to flee to Bangladesh during August 2017. Life in the refugee camp brought safety from the bullet, but it didn't bring an opportunity to rebuild our life. Students are not allowed to go to local school, local universities. There are almost no formal classroom in the refugee camp. Even internet connection and basic electricity are rare. Yet, it was in that time I understood how powerful education can be. For refugees, education is not only lessons or degrees. It is the means, it is the way to rebuild our dignity, to understand the reasons behind our sufferings, and to dream of a future where our lives are not defined by violence. I dreamed of that future, and I applied to more than 150 universities around the world. Most said no because of who am I, because of me being a refugee, because of me being a Rohingya. But I never stopped. It was one day I saw a post on Facebook about an online school called University of the People. At first, I thought it was a scam. I had no money to pay the application fees, but University of the People waived my application fees and provided me a full scholarship. I studied on my phone, usually climbed a hill to find access to internet, and sometimes struggling the electricity to charge my phone because there was no electricity in the camp. The credits I earned at University of the People later helped me to transfer to New York University, where I am now close to finish my undergraduate degree in social science. Making it as a history, as the first Rohingya refugee from the refugee camp to be studying here. So I'm very much grateful to all the people who have been helping me, including the US State Department and the government of Bangladesh, and all other people who have been supporting me, including the NYU, for this milestone, for these achievements in my life. Education is actually something that we need to see as both basic human rights and shared international or global responsibility. Because once we do have access to education, then we can lead our own life. My story is not only about what is possible, it is also a proof that shows that through a struggle, through barriers for millions of younger people still face today. There are many refugee camps that have no internet, that have no electricity. And without a connection, online learning, like myself from University of the People, and the AI tools cannot reach students. And there are many places where refugee students are not allowed to go to local school and local universities. AI tool is only a tool. Artificial intelligence is only a tool. If the government deny the right to education to the refugee student, even the best technological tool still fails. So we need to work on main three levels so that there is access to education for everyone. And the first level that I see is protections and policy. Governments and international organizations, international agencies must guarantee that the refugee student can study online or in person without fear or legal obstacle. The second level I see is support system. There must be more and more initiative to support refugee students. Otherwise, take me as an example. I came all the way from the refugee camp to the NYU, but I may have to stop my studies if there is no financial support or financial assistance for me. And the humanitarian assistance must also include internet, electricity, and safe learning space as essential need, not as extra requirement. And the third level I see is the partnership. And I do not see a best place than CGI for that. The partnership is all about the universities, the technology companies, and the community organizations should work together to provide accredited, low-cost, and multilingual programs that are available both online and offline. When these pieces come together, educations become like a tool of dignity and agency. It allows displaced people not only to live, not only to survive, but also to lead, to contribute to their community, and to rebuild the world and their community. I'm example that even if there is a small door to education is open, a refugee student can go through it, no matter how high the barrier. So let us work together from today, from now, so that the generations of Rohingya students and all other children in crisis no longer have to climb to the mountain only to get access to a classroom. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mara. A very powerful personal testimony of the challenges, of course, as well as an important mention of, amongst others, University of the People, which I've written about, which does a great job in ultra-low affordable access, purely online for learning, particularly to students from challenging parts of the world, as the one we'd heard. So now let's move to our second panel. So I'd love to invite to the stage, please, Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers and James Mwangi of the Equity Group Holdings, based in Kenya. Thanks both, great to see you. So let's keep up the theme, and we've got here a great geographical spread, US primarily and Africa, here to think about these issues which in many ways converge in terms of the challenges ahead. So quality and accessible education. Randy, what does that mean for you here at the moment?
So I was really pleased to have listened to the last two panels and the last speaker. What it means to me is we have to actually start simplifying our language and ensuring that people understand what we're doing. So quality and accessibility means how do we give kids agency? How do we create a way and pathways in each of our education systems so that kids and parents have safe and welcoming environments where kids feel safe and parents feel welcome and safe, and that the coursework is something that is engaging and relevant to kids so that kids actually want to be in school and teachers want to teach in school. I think we spend too much time 30,000 feet above and not enough time focused on how we connect student and parent need with opportunity, engagement, and empowerment.
And James, what does it mean to you? And you've been involved, we'll come in a minute to your programs, but how did you what's motivated you to focus on these issues, and what does it mean, quality and accessible education?
Education is a very powerful tool for change in society. And access and quality of education, to me, means leveling the playing field. It gives equal opportunities, it gives equity, and it gives this equal capacitation, and consequently, equity in society.
So you've both made yourself commitments before at CGI. Let's just talk a little bit about those, what the experience has been, what progress and impact has been since they were made. Randy.
So we've made a lot of economic commitments in terms of CGI. We've had some international education commitments as well. We've had some literacy commitments. But the economic commitments, I think, have been absolutely imperative in order to try and create economic opportunity for working people. The first day of CGI, people talked about what we did in terms of infrastructure. It was actually the California teachers retirement system, which was the base investor in LaGuardia Airport. And during that period of time of the last recession, when we needed to start building things, it was the pension funds that did those kind of things. On the education side, what we've been doing with First Book is really trying to create a love of learning. And I thought what the Chancellor said earlier today was very important about AI, not just the blue books, but the fact that what we're seeing in terms of AI is actually kids having less attention. What we're seeing in terms of social media, and if you haven't read it, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt is a really important read on this, that we have to find ways to get kids reading again. That kids are not reading, parents are not reading, millennials are not reading. And so what we've tried to do is we have, with First Book, we've given out over 10 million books over the course of the last 10 years to kids and families. And part of that started with a commitment here.
And it's perhaps worth saying, I mean, obviously people sometimes think about unions, including the AFT, on issues around working conditions and salary, but just say a little bit more about how you've been involved more in that sort of active pedagogy. And
right. So, and again, and Andrew, you and I have spent a lot of time together. It is really the value system of what we need to do, how education is absolutely imperative for opportunity and equity is, to me, it's obvious, and James just said it. But what is unobvious is that when it doesn't happen, when we don't spend the funding to do this, when we don't have the systems to do this, when countries around the world basically say, oh yeah, this is important, but it's really not important because we're not going to actually spend the resources for it, then you start seeing immediately the blame game. Like, who's to blame for not doing it? And oftentimes, the teachers in the classrooms who have the least amount of control or authority are the ones that get blamed, as opposed to trying to figure out how you empower teachers to do that work. And so what the union has done, and frankly, my predecessor, Al Shanker, did this years ago, decades ago, was we have to take the responsibility to try to do both, to try to not simply negotiate the salaries, but negotiate the conditions of work, negotiate the ideas and the practices so that kids succeed. And I spend more time doing that than I spend doing the negotiations of salaries. But that's why I said that the economic issues became our first issues that we worked on with CGI. Because if you do not, if workers in any country do not have a pathway to a middle class, you see the kind of anger and the kind of fear that frankly is gripping the United States of America right now. And so we have to try and create a win-win situation where workers and companies work together, yes, have their different roles, but work together for a better society, for a better life. And frankly, that starts with economics. If a family is really, really concerned about whether they can pay the bills or whether they can feed their kids, you're not going to have the kind of conditions for success that you need. That's why I start with first principles.
Sure. And James, Wings to Fly in Africa, your program, and your commitment, tell us a little bit about how it works and what's happened since you began it.
Thank you very much. To put it in perspective, we're the largest financial group in East and Central Africa. We've focused on financial inclusion, and so basically we were dealing with the low income. And we thought maybe to improve the environment in which we operate, the best thing we could do was to develop the next generation of leaders. So we started picking the best students after Form 4 and sending them through an internship program all the way to university. But sooner we realized that in that cohort, there were no children from the very disadvantaged families. And we questioned, we thought intelligence is evenly distributed. How comes the children of the poor don't win these scholarships? And quickly we realized that primary education is free, but secondary is paying, and so they never transit. And that's the concept of wings to fly. Fly from primary all the way to your dreams in education. And this program, we had a very huge ambition when we started it, 672 scholarships. That was what, but come to, I think, 2010, and I was really inspired when people were taking commitments. And I raised my hand, and President Clinton noted me and said, James, come and make your commitment out to the plenary. I said, we'll do 10,000. And immediately, everybody fell quiet. An ambition of 600 is turning to 10,000. I'm glad to say 2025, we have crossed 60,000 full scholarships. And brother, it became now a secondary program that has 60,000. We have transited 29,000 at a transition rate of 86 to university. And from global universities, we have 1,100 here in the US, 266 being in the Ivy League schools, and 49 being in Harvard University. This has been possible because of partnerships and collaborations. President Clinton was very kind, and Chelsea were very kind. I invited them, they flew in Nairobi, they commissioned, and as that gave us a lot of credibility. And as a result, we got a lot of partners. MasterCard Foundation came strong. The World Bank came very, very strong. KFW, USAID. So it's all about collaborations and partnerships. And when we see now the generation we have built, we see a cohort of next generation of leaders, globally exposed, properly networked, and with the right global exposure.
And in study, how do you identify those who become eligible for the scholarships? What sort of criteria do you use?
We use ability to pay. 87% of all the kids are orphans. It's simply the ones that are so disadvantaged that unless you give them the scholarship, they will not go to Form 1. And that is why we call it wings to fly.
And some element of, kind of inherent energy, talent, capacity as well. You're trying to pick that up. Ambition.
You must be very gifted in the 0.01% because we receive up to 150,000 applications because of the credibility of the program, but we are only able to give a maximum of 11,000 scholarships per year. So those in the plenary, if you are touched, there is a kid you can give a scholarship, and I'm willing to intercede on their behalf. So that's the real issue. So it's the very, very top, and that's why they're able to move all the way to university. The national transition rate from high school to university is only 13%. But these kids are transiting at 86%. So you can see the return of investment of this program.
So Randy, you touched a little bit briefly on the funding challenges. Of course, we're also seeing these huge political tensions federally, but also, of course, massive polarization and tension locally. School boards, politicization, book bans, self-censorship perhaps, and fear and concern by teachers. How to
particularly after last week.
I'm sorry?
I said particularly after last week.
Well, absolutely. And so what can be done to kind of ensure resilient and continued education in that context?
Can I just take a minute not only to applaud James for what they're doing, but James just made the argument for equity and for opportunity. And I just want to take a minute because that was what the laws of the 60s, and I talk about this a little bit in my new book, which is called Why Fascists Fear Teachers. That's what the civil rights laws of the 60s were intended to do. Lyndon Johnson had worked as a school teacher in the Hill Country in Texas as he was trying to make some money to get through college. And his kids, many of whom were Mexican American, came to school without shoes. His kids were so poor. And he understood what James just said, that to the extent that you want to create broad-based opportunity, you have to level the playing field, or you're essentially consigning the next generation to where the levels of their parents' level of academic or economic economic status. And so whether it's Africa or whether it's America, that's what public schools were intended to do, to both level the playing field and to try to create this kind of sense of possibility and promise for all. And it's absolutely imperative, if you don't have the financing, if you don't have the resources, there is just so much that we can actually take from our pockets to give to kids. 11,000 scholarships, 150,000 applications. Public schools are supposed to do this for everyone. And so that's why when we have been fighting really hard, not on the whether to have the Department of Education, I mean, that's a question, should we have it, shouldn't we have it? We believe we should have it. But the real question becomes, shouldn't there be a federal role? And that federal role has to be about resources and about equity and about equality from the Constitution, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, and 19th Amendment, but also from the civil rights laws. So you get into, yes, thank you. You get into, this idea of not only should there be Title I for poor kids, but IDEA for kids with disabilities, but then you get into what happens in local levels. And the issue in America is simply this. Should schools be about opportunity, imagination, passion, purpose? If you actually believe all of that, then there's always going to be a push at something new. And something new is really frightening to people, or dealing with something terrible like COVID is really frightening. And unfortunately, in the climate that we have right now, it's fear or flight. It's someone I disagree with has become my forsworn enemy, as opposed to the habits of democracy and trying to actually ensure that kids have, and I'm going to say it again, a safe and welcoming environment where they are engaged with a sense of purpose, passion, imagination, and a pathway to get there. And so I take your question in terms of saying, okay, how do we do this value system? How do we overcome that fear? How do we create this kind of civic discourse as opposed to getting into our tribes? Unfortunately, there are people in America, and some of which was part of Project 2025, that think that the creation of fear and anxiety is the way to create a universal voucher system. And in fact, one of these folks, the people who are, the architects of this, has said publicly that in order to create this kind of fragmentation, you have to create universal public school distrust. And that is what you're seeing in these different places. So it's a spaghetti on the wall concept. If it's not masks, then it's vaccines or CRT or DEI, and taking a word or an idea and then toxifying it. And so those of us who are trying to actually help kids learn, what we're trying to do is come up with language that is unifying in purpose, that is focused on kids and focused on what kids need. That's why you're hearing me say over and over again, safe and welcoming, engaging and relevant. Because I want to focus on what we can do universally to help get to the opportunity that James was just talking about in Africa.
And James, yes, so we've talked there about political polarization. obviously in Africa, where you're working, particularly in Kenya and DRC, huge economic challenges as well. Why is equity so important to you, and how to deal with that or mobilize governments, amongst others, to try to prioritize that for the next generation?
Thank you very much. As private sector, we must try as much as possible to have influence on government, to adopt the right policy, to make the right statements, because governments create the enabling environment on which we could. I'm excited that, as Radi has said, we inspired the Kenya government so much that they realized that the gap between the 10,000 and the 150,000 application, I kept on asking the president, where do these kids go? Because they don't go to Form 1. And essentially he said, okay, can we create a free day secondary education so that they can go? The only challenge is that the day schools, and you asked these questions earlier on, don't have the same quality with the national schools. So the kids are very highly qualified, but they're not being admitted to the schools of their choice. They're just being pushed to a school that doesn't have really the first. And that is where we do the lobbying with government. If you look at DRC, we've decided to use a circular form. And the kids that have qualified at university, we realized 1,800 of them have done medicine. And we challenged them, why don't you form a franchise and solve the problem of health in the countries we operate? As we speak, we now have 146 hospitals owned by those doctors and a franchise. So it's more of a question of engaging. But you'll not be able to do that unless you sit with the government to put the right policy in place, to give the right approvals. Lastly, is the issue of recognizing the challenges the governments, particularly in Africa, are going through. Previous borrowings have led these governments to be heavily indebted without headroom when to pay. And essentially, if that becomes imperative, that private sector must step forward instead of watching the disparity situation in the countries we operate in, and try and bring in a concept of private sector-led development financing. Because it's the environment that as we invest in these, that we help to do. But you not again do that unless the policy framework is right. The right incentives, the right prioritization. So it becomes more of a partnership between the private sector and the government to achieve objectives.
And one of the things that we're trying to do in high schools, junior high schools and high schools in the United States, is bring in private industry to help us with pathways and the experiential learning that the last panel was talking about. Because if we can create all sorts of different pathways for kids, you know, whether it's culinary or welding, or last week I was just in New Haven and saw a school called the Sound School, where the Long Island Sound is the classroom. And thinking about how we help kids have the imagination to see to their futures and do it in a way in public education so that every school has something really special that people feel like, I want to go to that school. I want to be in that place. Because for us in the United States, it has to be an all proposition, not just a some proposition. And that comes from the founders who really, really believed that critical thinking and education was absolutely essential in order for us to actually resist kings and monarchies again.
And just a very brief word, we're almost out of time, Randy, but just coming back, so partnerships in the private sector, including for pathways, very important, but how to keep the balance between notably the tech companies and the disruption that AI is causing and the role of educators?
So that's a really important question, as we have no time left. I would just say this. There are, I see AI as either as disruptive or transformative, depending on what word you use, as the printing press. And so what we have to do as educators is we actually have to make sure educators understand it and have some efficacy with it. And that's why we started this AI Institute funded by some of the tech companies. I have a lot of skepticism about AI, And I am particularly concerned about the disinformation, the privacy issues, and I'm very concerned about the attention issues. However, having said that, you can't hide. You can't, because if you do, we're going to have the same kind of situations as we had in terms of social media. We have to engage, we have to deal, we have to actually try to figure out the positives and use it, and also, as a community, fight against the negatives so that the human being is still in charge of society, not the machine.
So some great reflections. I'm afraid we're out of time. So James and Randy, thanks very much. And I think both to our prior panelists and our great speaker as well, a sobering reminder both of the challenges around the world as well as domestically at the moment here in the US, but nonetheless very inspiring to hear some great models of partnership and progress ahead. So do please thank our panel.
Thank you for attending this morning's session. We invite you to the Grand Ballroom, where our general session will begin momentarily.